Hey there once again, fellow flight simmers. Hey, what do you know? I'm back, and it's only been a few days. Well, the reason why I'm making this video, which is the reason that I decided to get back into recording in the first place, is that one of my viewers asked me a question, and I think I realized then that I had not made a video about that subject. And basically, the question is if it's possible to use the same displays, encoders, switches, or whatever to do multiple things, to maybe do a lot of functions using only one of each. And the reason why he was asking is he wanted to make some kind of a com nav panel, radio panel, but he didn't want to have a separate display for each standby frequency and active frequency, and a different encoder for the tuning, and a different switch for switching between the frequencies. So basically what he wanted to do was just make a very condensed setup, I guess you can say, and be able to do all the four of them with it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you what I've been working on, and then I'm gonna show you how to do it. Basically, the bottom line is that this is how to use selectors in SimVimX and Real Sim Control. Okay, so I have here on my table the little setup that I made, and basically what we're gonna do is I'm gonna use this display right here, the Max 7219. We're gonna make it do the standby frequencies for all four radios. This is gonna be the active frequencies for all four radios, and this is gonna be the rotary. It's a dual rotary encoder, so we can tune the megahertz and the kilohertz for all four of them. This is going to be it's a multi-position switch that we're going to use as our selector. So depending on the position that we have this switch is going to determine what these displays show, and is going to determine what the encoders tune. And also this button right here is going to be our switch flip-flop button, so that we can swap the active frequency with a standby frequency on the displays, and therefore on the radios in the airplane. So eventually what we're going to end up with is this little configuration file, which I already did. I like to do these things ahead of time, that way I make sure that it works before I show it to you guys, and I'm not wasting as much time putting it together while I'm recording the video. But I am going to go through the steps of building up the configuration file from scratch. So basically we're going to start with a fresh slate, and we're going to build it, and then you're going to see it working, hopefully. Okay, so let's get right to it. Okay, so here we are on the website now, and we're going to start putting together this configuration file. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to the configuration tool by clicking there, and as you can see, it already pre-populates because I'm logged in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out, because you only really need to be logged in, I think, when you are doing any custom conversions. So when you log out, it gives you a fresh slate so that you can start building a new configuration file. So the first thing we need to do is we need to remember what we need to assign. So we're going to have a input multiplexer, we're going to have an output multiplexer, and we're going to have two displays, a Max 7219 and a TM 1637 with 6 digits. We're going to have two encoders, a push button, and the multi-position switch. So since this whole video is about selectors, I'm going to start with a multi-position switch, and I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from the video here. Okay, so what we need to do first is assign a selector. That's going to be the device that's going to allow us to select between the different functions for each of the components that we talked about earlier. So we need to go right here to generic input output, and this first section up in the top here is the selectors. But in order to do that, we need to first configure our multiplexer board. So I believe on pin number 2 we're going to have an output multiplexer, which is where I have my two displays connected, and on pin number 8 we have an input multiplexer, and that's going to be where we have our encoders and our rotary switch. So I have other videos which describe already how to assign different things. So if you need to review other stuff, I'm pretty sure you can find it in one of my previous videos. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to select the rotary switch, and it's going to be a regular multi-position switch, and we need to have 4 positions on this one. So we're going to go to our input multiplexer board here, and I believe I have that assigned on pins 0 through 3, which is going to be four positions. So there it is. Now is that selector number 1. So we need to assign our 2 displays. So if you go to the MUX for outputs, which is the output multiplexer board, we have the TM 1637. I believe we have that one on pin number 15 right here. It's going to be a 7-segment display. Now as soon as you select that you have a display, you need to tell it what type. So you need to click on it here, and you go to type, and then you're going to select TM1637 with 6 digits. And this is where you can change the brightness of it. If it's too bright, you know, or too dim, you can play around with that. Okay, so that's going to be for the active frequency. For the standby frequencies, we're going to go to the multiplexer again, and we have on number 13, we have another 7-segment display, and we're going to tell it that that one is a max 7219, which is what it chooses by default. So I guess we can just go ahead and leave it like that. Alright, now we need to select, and this is very important, that whenever you do something like this, you need to keep the order of whatever you want those devices to do in the proper order, because if you put it in the wrong order, you're going to have a mix match of different things. Now hopefully I can explain that a little bit better in just a bit. Okay, so now that we're here on the ComNav radios, I'm going to go ahead and leave it for 2 digits only, because what I want to do, leave a space so that I can put these letters right here. So basically, because you're not going to have any way of knowing which one you are controlling, I just decided to put like COM1, COM2, and then N1 for NAV1, N2 for NAV2. So that's why I'm only going to use 2 digits after the decimal here. Okay, so we're going to start assigning things here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put that push button. That push button is going to be the flip-flop for all the radios. So remember, this is COM1 and NAV1, and this is COM2 and NAV2. So we're going to start off with the flip-flop here for COM1, and this is going to be on pin number 50 directly. So we're going to come over here, and we're going to put it on pin 50. Okay, and then we're going to add the flip-flop for COM2, and we're going to add it on 50 again, but this time, since you already have something there, it's going to ask you if you want to append it. So you're going to see this change from COM1 transfer to multiple, because now you have 2 things on there. You see that? Alright, and now we're going to do NAV1, and we're going to put it in the same one, because we're going to use the same button to flip between all 4 of them, and you're going to append it, and now you have 3. And now we're going to go to the flip-flop for NAV2, and we're going to put on the same one and append it. So as you can see, now you have 4. Now you already have a selector, so now what we need to do is we need to tell this that we want to use it with selector number 1, and for each one of these you need to make sure that you have the mode is the position. So let's say the first position of the switch will always be 0, the second one will be 1, the third one will be 2, and the fourth one will be 3. So it's always 1 behind, because in binary, in computers, everything starts with 0. It doesn't start with 1. Okay, so now that's for number 1. So now we're going to do number 2. It already knows that we want to use selector number 1 because I chose it for the other one, but you need to tell it this is going to be for position number 1, and then for number NAV1, this is going to be position number 2, and for NAV2 is going to be position number 3. Now what I always like to do, because I've seen it make mistakes before, is I always go back and then I look through all of them to make sure the numbers are correct. So that's 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it looks good. Everything looks good so far. So that's it for that button. Now we're gonna do, let's go ahead and do the displays. So remember our active frequencies are gonna be on display. Let me make sure. This is gonna be the 1637. No, this is the 7219. So this is gonna be the standby frequencies on pin number 13. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna do all of those. So standby on COM1, 7-segment display on 13, right there. And you have to do this every time. So standby for COM2 is this one, 7-segment display. The one that is lit up green is the one that is gonna choose. If this was selected green, then it would be an LCD, but we're using 7-segment displays. So once again, we go to pin number 13 and we add it here in the blank area. Now you can see we have 2 of them, right? And by the way, you can only add 4 functions to each thing. That's the maximum that we can use. Alright, so now we're going to do nav1 standby, 7-segment display on number 13, and then nav2 standby, 7-segment display on pin 13. So there, so now we got the 4 assignments for the standby frequency. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, because the standby display is where I want to put those letters. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave, it's going to be after the value, but first you have to type something. So I'm going to do a space, and it's going to be COM1 after the value. Hey, that's never happened before. Let's see. Huh. Maybe right now it doesn't want any spaces. I'm gonna try it just like that then. Last time I was able to put a space. I'm not sure why it's not doing that. Alright, so we're gonna do that, and then this is gonna be position number 0. And we're gonna use selector number 1 again. And now we're gonna do the same thing for COM2. It's gonna be basically C2 for COM2 after the value. And we're gonna use selector number 1, but this is position number 1. And then nav1 is going to be N1 after the value, selector number 1, position number 2. And then finally nav2 is going to be N2 after the value, selector number 1, position number 3. Alright, so that's it for that. Now let's just make sure that everything looks good. So selector 1, COM1, that's good. Position 1, COM2. Position, oh see, this one didn't change, so we're gonna change that to, oh no, it's 2. Selector number 1 is correct. And then finally this one's position number 3, selector number 1 for nav2. And remember, when we do this, that's what I was mentioning about the order. You have to make sure that every time you do this, you're gonna do COM1, COM2, nav1, nav2, or whatever order you decide to do, but it has to be consistent with the displays, the encoders, and the flip-flop switch. Because if you don't, then you might be displaying a different frequency and changing a different one and flip-flopping another one. So you have to make sure that everything is consistent in the right order. So now that we got all that put in the configurator. Now we're going to save the file. So we save the file and we're going to just call it the standard data.config, and we have to put save. Make sure it goes into the right folder, of course. Okay, so now we'll come over to our airplane here, and hopefully you guys can see this pretty good. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put the SimVimX status window here. You can see that I'm on the latest version of 2.15 of the plugin, and we're gonna reload the configurator here. Okay, so well, something's not right. It's saying that we only have 9 outputs. I think, well, we should have 8, not 9. So I'm not sure why it's saying that we have 9. But we'll figure it out right now. So as you can see on my little screens here, if you look here on COM1 nav1, you can see that we have 125.9 on the standby frequency right there, and we have 134.6 on the active frequency. Now, so that's because we're on COM1. You see that? So now if we do a rotary encoder, you can see that our frequency for the standby is switching. So now that's now you're seeing it, and then I can use the button and you can see that the frequencies swap. Alright, so now we're going to go to position number 2 on the rotary switch, and you can see that the display changed to COM2. And if we come over here to the simulator, we can see we have 121.78 on the standby and 119.27 on the active one. And if we switch this, see now the encoders are switching COM2, and you can see it in the simulator and you can see it on my displays. And now if we do the transfer button, you can see that it's transferring COM number 2. So it's working. Now we're going to go to nav1. So go ahead and switch it to position number 3, and you can see that it says N1 for nav1, 116.0, which matches what we see here in the simulator, and the active is 111.25, which is what it's showing here. And we'll switch the frequencies. So yep, it's working on nav number 1. And then we'll do the flip-flop, and it's working as expected too. And finally, last but not least, let me just move this daylight here. Alright, so finally we'll go to position number 4, or which is number 3 on the multi-position selector switch, and you can see that it has nav2, and it's 109.1 and 112.35 on the displays, which is what is showing there. And we'll go ahead and switch them, and it is switching, and we'll go ahead and flip-flop. So everything's working perfectly fine, just as it should. So now I wanted to show you guys, I'm going to go back to the display over here, to the website, I'm sorry, and I'm going to look at that configuration file. So although you shouldn't be messing around with the configuration file, as I mentioned it many times before, I do like to know how these things work. So obviously this is the inputs right here. This is a multiplexer with our selector. It's on 8.0 and it has 4 positions. And then for some reason on this configuration file, it doesn't say selector 1 position 0. You see how there's nothing here? It's obviously working fine, but it's not showing it here. On my other configuration file that I saved before, it did say S1:0 for position 0, just like it does on everything else. So I'm not sure why this time it didn't do that. It has it everywhere else except right here on the displays, but it is working properly. But as you can see, the all the things that I put are 0, 1, 2, 3 for the selector, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. And you know, you can do this any way you like it, but I would recommend, like I said, keeping a steady order. That way you don't have all kinds of mix matches. And here's the text right here. The T equals colon or at C1. I believe the at is a symbol for after, because I selected to do it after. So there you have it. That's how you do using the same displays, encoders, buttons, and other things, switches, to do multiple parameters, multiple assignments, and that way you can use one as a selector switch and get that all done. And I imagine, you know, this, what I was talking about, using the same buttons and everything to do different things for different airplanes. You could do the same thing with a selector. You could maybe do one of the positions for airliners, another position maybe for, you know, maybe a GA aircraft that has old-fashioned steam gauges, another one for something that has like a G1000 or some kind of GPS units, and then another one maybe for helicopters or whatever. And you can assign different functionalities to that way, instead of doing it the way that I was talking about, that unless you probably have a conversion for a specific aircraft, you're not going to be able to select those functions for a specific aircraft that way. But anyways, that's just my thoughts on it. I'm not even sure if that's actually the restriction on that. But hopefully the person that asked me this question will watch this video, and hopefully it clears it all up. And for anybody else that maybe didn't even think about doing this. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. And like always, I'll see you on the next one, and thanks for watching.